For our next speaker, Nirupama will introduce Dr. Mamam Dai.
The third speaker is Dr. Mamang Dai. Dr. Dai is a poet and novelist from Pasighat, Arunachal Pradesh. A former journalist, Dr. Dai also worked with the Worldwide Fund, for Nature in the Eastern Himalaya Biodiversity Hotspots program. In 2003, she received the State Verrier Elwin Award for her book Arunachal Pradesh, The Hidden Land, featuring the culture, folklore, and customs of Arunachal's different communities. A Padma Shri awardee, Dr. Dai is the author of two collections of poems and works of fiction and non-fiction, including the novel The Black Hill, that received the Sahitya Academy Award 2017 in English. Her latest publication is the novel Escaping the Land. Thank you.
Good afternoon, respected Chairman INTAC, respected Vice Chairperson INTAC, Member Secretary Ji, Madam, Nirupama Ji, thank you for inviting me here. Thank you, INTAC, for so graciously hosting us, my esteemed speakers on the panel, and everyone present in the hall today. I would like to continue with the tradition, with speaking about the oral tradition, because I come from a community in Arunachal Pradesh where we have no written script. In fact, most of the people in the northeast region of India, of the country, are non-script. We are speech communities. But I think the oral tradition is still very strong. To start with, I would just like to mention a festival we celebrated just recently. It happens always on the 1st of September. That has become the official date for celebrating this festival, which is tied to the agricultural cycle. And it has 5 days of singing. You know, these are the epic narratives of the tribe where the creation myths come in, you know, the creation of cattle, how we developed agriculture, all the gods, goddesses, the divinities, the benevolent, the malevolent. So this is the great festival of Solung, which was celebrated recently. But my focus is more on the Shaman tradition of the chanting these epic narratives, because I feel embedded in these stories, which, you know, my niece and nephew and the keynote speaker yesterday, Mr. Kanisetti, also mentioned. These are not so attractive to young people. You know, they want something else, they want something faster. There's so much on satellite. Nevertheless, I think embedded in these stories are what gives us our identity, sense of self, sense of place. But one has to look carefully, listen again, and that is why the title of this talk is really a map of doorways. I know it sounds very intriguing, but it is just to say that if we are talking about memory, living heritage, time, and practice amongst communities, we will also always have to revisit, go through other doors to ancient places which we might have abandoned, but where we might again find something that we would like to remember or that will give relevance to our lives in the present. Don't forget, we were also youngsters once. Our elders must have thought we will entrust them with responsibility, we must pave the way for them. But here we are today. It's a continuous process. People are always struggling towards a better world. And I think a little bit of guidance can come if we keep these doorways open, so to say, the gateways of survival, looking forward, rooted in the present maybe, but also looking back to ancient traditions that will help us in this journey. So this is a landscape of doorways. Now, in the current scenario, we have everybody will say you must celebrate your festivals with fervent gaiety, and you must preserve your culture. Loss of culture is loss of identity. But how do we preserve this culture? More recently, we have something in Arunachal Pradesh where people from Rajiv Gandhi University are being sent to go and look at the archives in England and elsewhere to find out what was our, colonial past, what happened with all the conflicts that occurred in the area, who were the freedom fighters, who are our martyrs. So this is a kind of retrieval of the past. At the same time, there is a very valiant effort by young people to come together and kind of forge a pan-Arunachal identity, because we have some 25 tribes, different clans, sub-clans. But to my mind, I think identity is it's such a multiple term. You have your social, cultural, political, your ethnic. So many identities are there. And in the past, if you think of pan-Hellenic identity, pan-Islamic identity, somehow it doesn't sort of work out, because the question will always come up, who will shape this identity? And also, I think when you talk about mutual interconnectedness, how do you navigate this mutual interconnectedness? And global world really is a kind of creation of a pan identity of consumers. That is what I feel. In our stories, let me say, this was, looking at the current scenario and where we are trying to chronicle 30 years of being a state for Arunachal Pradesh, 50 years of our Arunachal identity with the name Arunachal Pradesh. I was looking at some of the writings, earlier writings left by some of our elders. They're in very small, almost falling apart booklets. And I know the stories very well, I've been dealing with it in my writings. But looking at it again, I thought, I found something. It said, the Solong drama, and then below was Gompilko, which I hadn't noticed before, which just means a word, one moment, a word, please, or a word. And then I realized you really come upon things, if you leave your doors open, if you're willing to look at things again. And then I thought, okay, these are the stories, and I was trying to read it in my mother tongue, Adi. And they say that, the shaman will draw inspiration from different sources. There are also people who can communicate with spirits, and there are those who are purely rhapsodists, who will only recite the stories of creation, the epic narratives I was talking about, during certain festivals. But every one of these epic narratives will begin with the same genealogy of, nothingness, from where the Earth's evolution began. And then talking about nature. Nature, to the communities here, it's not a separate entity. We were talking about the languages of the Andaman people. I think the Inuit people also have like 32 words for snow. It depends on the environment you're living in. So the environment, the landscape is really not apart from the people who are living there. The land is a being just like us. We live the weather, share food, rice, water, sun, salt. This is kind of encapsulated in all these epic narratives I was talking about. we go to war, kill each other with our weapons, or are killed by a drowning river or an avalanche of rocks. There is no blame. The land and the people share a bond that is both cruel and kind, like brothers sharing territory. Since both are equal to the other in a state of mutual regard and awe, a state of kinship. This accounts for our numerous rituals that in turn are regarded as enlightened, civilized, or barbaric from a contemporary viewpoint. It is a way of talking to the land, communicating with the voice of thunder and sky, and understanding the sanctity of all life. I think stories are important because they open up more doorways, a world of stories. They are like the branches of a tree, and one story runs into another. And we did have a session in Naharlagan. Nirupama Madam also had come. We were talking to, shamans from different districts and talking about the shaman tradition. And this happens also if you look at the narratives, I think all of the world's cultures and the present is still rooted at the center of everything is a myth. There are new myths, there are political myths, there are myths of sustenance, but at the core is the myth of good and evil, of overcoming difficulties, of being a good human being, of carrying forward, of leaving a legacy. So these are all encapsulated in myths. And in one of our narratives, we call it penge, which is usually a song of mourning. So in this ritual, people come together and there's an official or an invited mourner who will sit through the night with the person who has passed away, and they will chant right from childhood up until, he's escorting the soul to this point where it will cross the veil into the other world. At that point, the chanter will turn into a hawk and fly back so that the departed soul, doesn't come back or feel at loss. Now, listening to these songs, it's really quite consoling for the grieving people. But something also happened that, we were having a penge in the house, and people were saying, oh, we hadn't prepared cut wood for tomorrow. Now at night, it's taboo to chop wood. Then someone said, we can always take the bamboo. Why? Because the bamboo never sleeps. So bamboo is of the grass family. Immediately my imagination, I thought, oh, the grass that never sleeps. Because the bamboo is kind enough to want to offer itself to the needs of people. So this is what a story does, I think. These are narratives that do things. It gives you something. When the Ramayana Mahabharata was being aired on Doordarshan, people would rush to TV sets. You might even have offerings around the TV set because you feel these stories are going to bestow something on you. In the case of healing and chanting rituals, they also bestow power and a sense of consolation. So I think these are important, all the little stories, and there are gateways to remind us of a past from ritual specialists who are gatekeepers of survival. And when you say, the Northeast, it needs more development, I think development brings its own problems and imbalances if it's not carefully negotiated, because then you have aspirations, and aspirations also bring a kind of conflict. But when I talk about development, it's not only bamboo and textiles, weaving, songs of hunters and warriors, I would like to finish with a little poetry stanza from a good friend of mine. She's a well-known writer from Manipur, another intangible asset because she's Miss Arambam Ongbi Memchubi. So here is the image of a basket. One day I asked her, "Oh, my beloved mother of the hills, inside the basket on your back, what rests within? Inside the load on your back, what have you put in? Let me look, just this once, mother." She said, "Here, take a look." And then, bending over, she showed me the load on her back. Not for a moment did she, however, put it down. This is how, our artifacts, our oral histories can also be evolving because they're not fixed in stone. This is a different kind of universal image that Memchubi has done. I peeped in, curious to know what was inside. Inside the basket, in mother's basket, I saw her old husband, her youthful son. Bewildered, I asked, "Why, mother? What is this?" Mother looked at me once and said slowly, "If I don't carry them, how will they survive?" Without any further words, she walked away as before, calmly, solemnly, my beloved mother. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful narration of people's minds, myths, and insights into how women carry their burden in baskets and nobody sees and they don't put it down. And that was a very befitting ending to this lovely story which Professor Mamang Dai narrated.